Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Beautifully Broken podcast. We are here with a long-awaited guest, Joel Evan. Welcome to the show.
What's up, brother? Good to be here.
So many things, so many things. I remember when I first met you, and we were both really, really into everything wellness, everything human optimization. And I met you at a show, and I was shocked to learn that you were a police officer. Which blew I thought it was the coolest thing. I was like, wait a second. There's a law enforcement individual who's into all this longevity technology that I'm in. Tell me about that.
Yeah, man. So, it's crazy. So for people that don't know me, background, I worked 6 years in Oakland, California, okay, as a police officer. Now, anybody that doesn't know Oakland, just to give them context, I mean, just Google Oakland. It'll always come in top 5, top 10 most deadliest violent cities in the United States. Right now, there's something floating around. I just saw they're number 32 in the world out of 108 cities. And they're below Colombia, Bogota, Colombia is 34 or something. And they're 32. So it's a dangerous place. 5 years in Oakland is a 20-year career in law enforcement anywhere else. That's just, and how do they come up with that? It's just based on the violence. It's based on what you will see as an officer there. The staffing has always been low. And so you always have to do the most with the least amount of cops. You just see a lot faster than the average person. And the criminals are really, really good in Oakland because they're relatively lenient in prosecution. So they learn how to get out of jail and then do crimes over and over again. And so they're really savvy compared to the average criminal in the US. So I did 6 years there. I went to San Francisco thinking the grass would be greener, worked there for about 8.5 years. And just to give people context, people think San Francisco is a worldwide city, and it is, but it's like playing wiffle ball compared to being in the pros, which is like Oakland, as a police officer standpoint. And what happened for me, Freddie, is I just got disenfranchised with police work over time. When my son was born 10 years ago, my first son, and I was like, I don't feel the magnetic pull to do this anymore. It just doesn't satisfy me. The craving isn't there the way it was when I first started 25. And I think I just, for me, I reached this level of I want to serve in a different way. And there's more to life than me being successful and getting all these accolades and successes. I felt like I did pretty well. I'm like, how can I give back? And so my son got me into biohacking, just so you know. I've always been a big health guy. But as a new parent, I was sitting with him on my rocking chair, holding him for 2 hours while he would nap. I mean, it's the most ridiculous thing. Parents shouldn't do that, but a lot of new parents do. And that's what I did. And so I'm a productive person. I'm I got to figure out a way to be productive still. I'm just sitting here for 2 hours. So I started listening to podcasts. And all of a sudden, I stumbled upon Lewis Howes' podcast, School of Greatness. I stumbled upon Dave Asprey's podcast, The Bulletproof Radio, and Ben Greenfield. And I said, oh my God, these guys are talking about health. I thought I knew health. These guys are talking about health and mindset and things I never even heard about. And that led me down this path of wanting to know more. That led me to becoming at the time, back in 2016, Dave Asprey had the Bulletproof Coaching Program, the Human Potential Institute. That led me to doing that. I said, man, one day I want to be a coach. I want to leave police work. And then the last thing I would just tell your listeners is my mom got diagnosed with cancer probably almost a decade ago, 10 years ago. And I just remember feeling helpless. I'm learning all these cool things in biohacking, like ozone and oregano oil and all these fascinating things. And I know a lot, but I also know very little. My mom has been diagnosed with cancer and I can't get her better. What am I going to tell her? A typical biohacker's oh, you should have some glutathione or take some charcoal or oregano oil. It's yeah, but what are the systems and protocols to getting somebody better? I want to know someone who can take you from A to Z and get you better, not just yeah, try this and see what happens. That's a great biohacking thing to say, but can you get them better? And so that forced me to wanting to learn more and is there someone that's done it that actually legitimately has systems and protocols? And that led me to finding Dr. Cabral, who has a lot of good protocols. I'm not saying he cures cancer, but the guy knows a freaking lot. And he's always about, and he was a sick man, a sick kid, and he balanced himself, and he has tons of, he's done over 250,000 lab appointments, and he's seen everybody and he's helped them. So that led me to working with him, being a student of him. And then ever since, man, I've just continued down the path of like wanting to learn, wanting to know more as you. And here I am today.
Amazing. Amazing. I have so many questions. We're going to go unpack some of that. Yeah, I would join with you. For me, I think my lead-ins to really getting hooked, I think it was even like Tony Robbins and Tim Ferriss in the beginning. Definitely Ben Greenfield was later. Dave at some point came in there. There were so many good people in the early days. And I just remember
Right.
being
4 Hour Body.
every
I
single
forgot about
morning I
that.
woke up, I was like, who am I going to find today? It was wild.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was wild. When you got started in police work, you said you had lost the draw or the sensation. What brought you in the beginning that made it like this really strong pull for your soul to want to do police work?
I always wanted to do something with my hands and my body. Like I wanted a job that it was the best of both worlds. Like you had to be in police work really can be that because you have to be a tactician. You know, you can't, there has to be some mindset. You can't just, and what I mean by that is like, you can't just go out and just shoot people. Like you can't do that. Like maybe if you're in the military, like it's pretty simple and black and white. But when you're in a police setting, like you have to be you literally have to be a thinker. And I like that. I like that idea. And I also like the idea of doing something physical in my job, not just being sitting at home in an office. I didn't want to do that. And, you know, I'm sure there was also a play. My grandfather in the 1950s to the 70s was a San Francisco cop. My father was a cop. I never thought I'd be a cop. I thought I was going to be much better and bigger and badder than them. So I had dreams of being like an FBI agent. And I was sitting at my house at 25 years old, and my dad was like, I was tired of being at home, Freddie. Okay. I was doing these sales jobs. I'm like, I got to get out of this house and make money. And I'm waiting for the FBI to get back to me. And they're not getting back to me. It takes a long time. And my dad said, Oakland police is hiring. And he's like, why don't you just start with them? And then if you still want to work for the FBI, you can. I said, that's a great idea, Dad. That's the smartest thing you've ever said. You know, kids always think they're smarter than their dad. I said, that's the smartest thing you ever said. I'm going to do that. And because I figured, hey, if I could just get some work experience, then I'm more marketable. I never thought I'd be a police officer long term. I thought that would just be a stepping stone. Truth be told, I worked with a lot of FBI agents while I was in Oakland doing joint operations, and they're a complete joke. Like once I started meeting these guys, I'm like, I don't care. I can't imagine being one of them. Most of them are nerds. Most people don't understand this. There are a lot of pencil pushers. They do a lot of data and a lot of work behind the scenes collecting data. So the way I like to explain it is an FBI agent, you have to think about them. Most of them. Now, this is the majority. There are some really badass guys that do SWAT operations, some cool, fun stuff. But most of them don't. They sit in an office and they do surveillance or whatever for like 100 days. And that's why the FBI cases stick, guys, because why do they get 80% time? Because the FBI watches you for like 6 months or a year. And then they go out of the field and actually go get you and do a big bust once a year. So a cop is out every day busting people left and right. A lot smaller. So maybe they don't stick as long term as like an FBI. FBI's been like, we've been watching you for a year. You for sure. There's no, like, we got you on camera every freaking day of the year. Right. So those cases stick. But I remember doing operations with like, you know, the FBI and the IRS. And these guys were like, they didn't even have their guns loaded. They were like going to the back of the trunk. They're like, all right, we're going to load our guns. And then they were giving themselves these mental pep talks. And I just thought it was so hilarious. I'm like, dude, I do this every day. Like my gun is always loaded. And I'm mentally ready every freaking day. Cause if I don't, like, it could be a problem. And I just thought like, wow, what an interesting paradigm. These guys get ready once a year, twice a year. I'm ready every day.
Yeah, wild. I think about some of the work that you and I both we know there's value to sleep hygiene and nervous system tone and buffering that response between outside world to inside world. I can't imagine. I even think about this in people that are pulling over people for speeding, walking up to the car with the potential that person could pull a gun on you or do something terrible. How did you manage your nervous system in those situations, especially in Oakland?
Yeah, I didn't know what I do now too. So it'd be a very different game. And, you know, I was in an officer involved shooting my first year and a half out as a rookie in Oakland. And I didn't know what PTSD was or anything. We didn't really talk about it. It's more talked about now, but back then, especially in a culture like Oakland, you were considered a weakling. Like, I mean, nobody told me that, but like, I knew like that was going to be the stigma. Like, you're a weakling. And I was in a shooting. And just so for people that don't know, I didn't shoot in this case. So in some ways, it was even more traumatic because then it's like, well, why didn't Joel shoot? I was with my partner. It was a high speed chase, 3 a.m. The guy we didn't know this, but he had just committed a robbery that went bad and it ended up being a homicide. And so he was on methamphetamines, heroin, 8 ball. He had everything on him, everything on board. Later, we found out. Really, really bad guy. And we pulled him over because he was just recklessly driving. He was swerving like he seemed like he was a drunk, which he was. He was intoxicated with a cocktail. We didn't know that though. We were just like, my partner and I literally thought, all right, 3 a.m. We get off at 5 a.m. on our Friday night. Let's just get a quick arrest and go home. Like that was our goal. And that led to be a high speed chase. The guy ended up running from us. He reached in his waistband. He came towards me in my direction. My partner took that as a threat and shot him. And I did not because my angle was different and I didn't see what he saw. And so I didn't shoot. So then, probably 6 months later, for about a 6 month period, I would walk up to suspects or cars or anybody. And I would my hand would be shaking uncontrollably. I could not write. And I would look down at my hand and I would study it. I'm like, it doesn't look like it's shaking. So then I would look at them. I'm like, do they know I'm shaking? Nobody knew I was shaking, but like I literally, Freddie, could not write. And I tried to prove to myself that I was man enough and strong enough. So I'd go out and stop 3 people. Like, screw stopping 1. Let me stop 3. I'm going to prove to myself that I can get over this. And I would do it. And I would just walk away from stops. Like the guys would give me their IDs and I'd pretend like I was writing it down, but I couldn't. And then I would just be like, hey, have a nice day. I'll see you later. Like, you guys are good. I had no idea. So anyways, we didn't talk about that. But I would say at the time, what did really well for me, you mentioned Tony Robbins. So I read Tony Robbins when I was 18. I got into that success growth mindset. I used to sell cutting. I studied all the great people, Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, Jim Rohn. And so I think I had a good success mindset. I always studied every year. So from 18 to even 25 being a cop, I was always studying the greats and learning from them. And then I always worked out. I always kept myself healthy. So I'm sure that always had a good response for my nervous system in general. If I knew what I knew now, I'd even double down even harder on it. But that's what I would say. I think I always was an optimist and always saw the glass as half full versus half empty. And most cops and most first responders are pretty negative because they live negative lives. They see the negative in everybody every day. And I just never took things too personal. So I think for me, that was one of my biggest things. For the way I act now is the same way I act as a cop, and people know it. And even guys I'd pull over, they could never believe it. I mean, I would have guys say to me, I remember when I transferred to San Francisco and I pulled this car over in the Bayview district, which is more, poverty area, and more rife with crime than some of the other neighborhoods. And I pulled this guy over and I let him go with the warning because I could care less about traffic stops. I just use that as a modality to look for bigger things, guns, drugs, things like that. And he was a nice guy. I mean, he made a traffic violation, but he had nothing else going on his record. So I let him go. I was like, have a great day. And he looks at me and he goes, hey man, where are you from? I go, what do you mean? He goes, I never seen you before. And what he was telling me was like, I know everybody because I get stopped a lot. I know every cop here. I never seen you before, but you clearly are not a rookie and you hold yourself in a way with great poise. And I talk to him like a human being. Like, I don't treat him like I'm the cop and I'm the law. I never did that with people. It just wasn't my thing. And because I think I had that little bit, I knew where I stood in the world. There was a detachment of ego. I think that helped me long term,
Yeah. What do you think has changed in the last 3 to 4 years as far as have things been implemented knowing the tension that exists between the general public and law enforcement? Are there better, is there therapy? Are there services? Do people have access to things to help with this, again, severe complex PTSD that's just hardwired into the, sounds to me like it's a nature of the career more than anything.
Yeah, it is. You're not going to get around it. There's guys out there like me who have left the business. We could always talk about it. I didn't leave the business. They forced me out over the vaccine mandates, which I chose not to do. That's how I got fired from San Francisco PD because of that. But that was about 3 years ago in 2021. There's guys like me that talk about it a lot. There's firefighters like James Gearing out there ringing the bell saying, hey, we got to change the sleep structure. This is ridiculous. Like, we see in our profession, suicide is very, very high. And it's because of all these things, the nervous system breakdowns, the lack of attention, the shift work, the relationship breakdowns in families, et cetera, et cetera. So it's, and again, you see the worst with the least. And, you know, to give some people context, we, there's a term used out there called condition yellow. Now, a guy invented this color system a long time ago, saying military, first responders, when you have a sense of awareness, condition white is like, I have zero awareness of what's going on. Like, imagine you're just walking by, bonk, you get hit in the head. Like, you don't have any awareness. Next level up's condition yellow. You have a little bit heightened awareness. You're paying attention to things. Then you got orange. Red would be like, you're like super triggered. Maybe you're in a gunfight. And black is like, you blacked out, PTSD. You have no idea what's going on. You've reached your threshold in stress. Well, they say that first responders, police officers, you know, they walk around outside of their life in condition yellow all the time. So they're at a hypervigilant arousal state, right? And it's such a unique job. I always think about it now is that you go from maybe a sexual assault where you have to be super empathetic and with the victim, connected with the victim, understanding their pains and problems. And then the very next call, you'd be going to a gunshot call. So now you got to be heightened awareness. It's this ebb and flow, and it just takes a toll on the nervous system. So are people doing things? Yes. But at the end of the day, we live in a corrupt world where government and big pharma run things, and there's a bunch of corrupt programs, in my opinion. You see all these nonprofits. Like recently in San Francisco, I saw like the homeless. They don't know where $26 billion went. They just don't know where it went. I mean, come on, man. How does this stuff happen? And so I think there's a lot of good people out there, but they're not getting the attention they should be. And to me, the dishonest people are getting their pockets funded. And there are these social programs that sound really good, like equity and diversity and all these big buzzwords that people use. But do they move the needle? In my opinion, they don't. They're just very political, and they're actually used in a very divisive way, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine somebody like you, I'm just like spitballing, like, what if you were to walk into a police department and like, okay, guys, we're going to go over a sleep hygiene protocol, and I'm actually going to bring in the NeuFit. We're going to do a nervous system reset. And then we're going to do a little pulsed electromagnetic field just to take the tension out of your guys' tissue index. And if that's some type of a service, one thing that Flowpresso does at full body lymphatic drainage, I know you know the system, and I know you know Desiree.
Yeah.
Part of their mission is parking those in firehouses and first responders so they have access, because all their research was done on sleep. They showed that one session a week, 3 weeks in a row, they had a 92% improvement in sleep quality across the board. And that was based after a large mass shooting in New Zealand, which is very, very rare for that area of the country. Have you ever thought about doing that? Or do you think anybody would be open to that? I got to imagine they would.
Yeah, I think it's becoming more and more open. And I think cops and first responders are becoming a little bit more open to it. And there's always going to be people that are like the naysayers, and that's fine. I always say, like, try it, get results. And if you get results and people are talking about it, it's going to build up buzz. I love the work that Desiree is doing. And like, yeah, we should have a Flowpresso in freaking every station in the United States. If money could afford it, let's do that. I'll just say that right before I left the department, not left, was ousted. Let's get that clear. Right before I was ousted, I was tapped to there was 10 stations within the department. I was actually within the academy. So maybe you call that the 11th station, but there's anyways, they had wellness officers for each designated station. And I took over a position there because everyone knew what I was all about.
Yeah.
And I was talking to the head person in charge of the wellness overall of San Francisco. And I was like, hey, listen, I appreciate what you're doing, but this is a joke. I didn't say it like that, but I said, listen, we can do better. Like, have you thought, and I had connections in the Bay Area with neurofeedback and things like that. I go, we need more. And how can I help be the bridge to this? And you know what she told me? She said, by the way, she was smoking and stuff at the time. She goes, Joel, listen, we're doing like these free blood pressure tests and stuff. We can't even get compliance with that. And so they were doing very basic stuff. I was trying to get like the department to get like Aura rings and like do a pilot program to like show where they could track their HRV and improve and do things like that. And then COVID hit, and then that made it really hard. You know, it can't even be around people. So then that was a difficult time. I think, again, there's possibility, but just to show you the bureaucracy, they can't even get people to do like blood pressure tests or like basic low level things to me that don't even move the needle. Like, who cares about blood pressure? I mean, don't get me wrong, I care, but there's so much more. As you know, the exposure we have in this world, there's so much more and we could be doing better. Let's do it. And bureaucracies don't want to innovate, really, right?
I know it moves slower. You
It
know,
moves slower. Yeah.
I am aware that it moves slower, and I am aware that that's part of the process. But I would just say maybe the blood pressure wasn't exciting enough to create a thirst within the officer community that, guys, we're actually going to be delivering a Morosco Forge to the police station. And I can't imagine that wouldn't catch on like wildfire, only, and because there's all that masculinity of like, come on, bro, how long are you getting in the tub for? And my nervous system, when I get out of the ice bath for 3 minutes, it's undeniable. It's undeniable. Yeah. We gotta find a station that's up for that. The firehouse down the road, they have a pickleball court that they set up in between, when the engines are all parked, they're out, they're playing, they're out, and I know there are people that would be open to it.
Yeah, it will. And just, I think people should always understand Pareto's principle, which is, that kind of the 80-20 rule. And you see that across the board in every organization. Like, the reality is there's 20% of the workers of every organization that are getting you 80% of the results. And so we see that across the board. We see that in crime. We see that in organizations. And so I would tell you that the people you're going to get buy-in from are the true alpha or the SWAT team kind of members. Those guys are driven and they love to excel and exceed. You're going to see that a lot from them. You'll see that less from just the average run-of-the-mill officer. But you see that in general populations. That's actually pretty normal. So I'd say, yeah, make it available and let's change the paradigm of what health looks like. That's it.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I want to in a politically correct, don't pull me off YouTube, I'd love to talk about your departure from the police force. And again, I would just say anybody that listens to the podcast, we have a lot of listeners, a lot of different belief systems across the board. From my understanding, Joel, you've and I've known you for before the pandemic. Your commitment to physical fitness, to self-improvement, to expanding your knowledge and understanding of the human body and psyche, that's always been there. And you're a wonderfully abled, like if people don't watch the video, you're a fit dude. What's your Instagram, Joel?
Joel Evan Coaching.
Joel Evan Coaching.
Yep.
You're always doing like crazy burpees, jumping over picnic tables, and I mean, if I were looking at an asset to the police force, like physically, I would want you in my car. So the idea that you had to leave the police force because of a mandate in the pandemic feels incredibly unfair to me. I know life's not fair, but if you could sum up how things went down and where you're at with that today.
Yeah, and I know what it's like having a podcast as well and being censored and being blocked. People don't know about it. We feel it every day. People don't even know it's happening. It's happening, guys. I've just had my third video on YouTube removed over the last couple of years with Robert Rowan I did on ozone, and he was talking about viruses and stuff. So it's happening, unfortunately, and it's really sad because I think information is just information. And people should look at it and make their own determination, not misinformation, disinformation, whatever they want to call it. Listen, bottom line is this, and it's not about politics. Oh, actually, it is about politics. Unfortunately, that was why I was let go, because the science, as we know, proves that I'm actually right. And actually, the law, what they did was illegal. The law actually doesn't allow this, and they violated the law. And the only reason I know is because I had to study it when I was going through this process. And, there's great people out there. The Healthy American, Peggy Hall, talks a lot about this and about, she talks about it. Just read Title VII and you will see that religious exemptions are a thing and they have to be offered. I mean, let me just show you the insanity for people that don't understand San Francisco. There are people in San Francisco Police Department right now that are claiming to be a Norse pagan Viking. And because they are a Norse pagan Viking religion, they should be able to have a beard, okay? And guess what the department does? It's a Title VII issue, guys. The department doesn't even blink. They know they don't want that to be a lawsuit because it's going to be a big problem. So there is a person at the police department right now who claims to be a Norse pagan Viking because he wanted a beard, and they granted it. I have a religious exemption that I put in saying I don't believe putting this product in my body for
Mm-hmm.
all the several
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
reasons. And it was accepted. A month later or 2 months later, it was later denied. Okay. And so it was just atrocious what they did to me. And then they fired. They said, you have a month to get this product or you're fired. And I was just like, dude, I'm not getting this. And if you go back in time, back to July 2020, I believe, 2020, I interviewed Del Bigtree. We talked all about this. And that's why I was so prepared. I knew all about the vaccine industry because I had to study vaccines. Listen, I have vaccines in my body. My parents got them for me when I was a kid. I didn't know any better. I grew up with that paradigm. Like, these are a good thing. I didn't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But when I had to have my first child, it was the first time I had to go, man, are these safe? I don't even know. Like, and I started doing my own research, Freddie, and I kept running into pitfalls. I kept running into like, something isn't making sense here. And that bothered me. Now, we go back, you can look at some of the stuff Del Bigtree's been screaming about for years. He has a show called The High Wire, and I interviewed him and we talked about it. And the fact of the matter is they ran experiments testing this product on rats and a whole bunch of other things. And every animal that they tested it on died within 3 months from all the things we're seeing, heart failure, all these things. It was never scientifically proven to be safe. And so I knew this. I knew this coming out of the gate. And they mandated it. And then they mandated it across the board. And the reality is, I'll just tell people, is, this creates a lot of emotion for people. I think there's a lot less emotion. At the time I was talking about it, it was very emotional because you're vax or anti-vax, or that means you're a Democrat or you're a Republican. Listen, I don't care about politics. I swear I could care less. I think it's all distraction and noise. And so is the division created between vax and anti-vax. I really don't care. Do whatever you want. But for me, if you're just looking at the science, if you look at any science, what I tell people is this: look at every scientific study done on vaccines. And if you can find one for me that shows that there was a double-blind, placebo, randomized control study, then and that was legit, a safety trial was done, that was legit, then I'll take every freaking product they make. But I have yet to see one. They don't exist, guys. They just don't exist.
Yeah.
And realize that, you start to ask yourself some questions, and you should.
Yeah.
And that was it for me. So
yeah.
So bottom line is, Freddie, that to give you the button around it is, they accepted my religious exemption. A couple months later, they said, you know what? It doesn't matter. Things have changed. By the way, this is after I'd worked 1.5 years throughout the pandemic. Never missed like a freaking day. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Worked plenty of overtime, did everything they asked me to do.
Yeah.
By the way, when the pandemic initially started, do you think they cared about me and my safety? Absolutely not. You know what they did to me? I was working at the academy as a trainer, and they sent me down to ground zero, Union Square, downtown San Francisco. Because you know what they said? Oh my God, the mayor is worried because there's all these vagrants now out, and all the cities closed down. So the only thing we see are vagrants. And this virus spreads via tight populations. So people can't be congregated. So we want the police department to go down to ground zero. We don't care if you get it, but we need you to separate and move the homeless around because it's just doesn't look good. It's bad. It looks bad. And so nobody cared. And I did exactly what they told me to do. I went down, did that for 2 or 3 weeks, however long they asked me. I didn't call in sick. I did exactly what that. I was healthy for 1.5 years, and it didn't matter to them. And they never, and if you look at just the last thing I'll say is, if you just look at surrounding cities, if this was about science and the spread of some contagion, why were the other cities allowing their officers to have exemptions? Clearly there was some political motive. And we later found out that they got, I think, 9.8 billion, California, to force the product. That's evidence now. So anyways.
Yeah. Well, I'm watching. I'm just again. I just think it's interesting. I'm watching this play out in court. It's certainly a lot of my friends who are nurses that were forced to leave their jobs because they would not comply. Some have won their court cases. They took legal action against the state and they've won. Quite a few. I don't think I've seen any that have went the other way yet. You may or may not be able to talk about it at this time, but are you involved in a legal court with the state?
Yep, we have one going. These things take time, unfortunately.
Oh yeah. I can only imagine.
I wish I had. We're seeing a lot of cases in California. They're winning, but just why? I don't know why mine's taking so long.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's just fascinating to me. I think again, I'm things that we couldn't say 2 years ago. I just saw Health Canada changed a lot of the warning labels, and actually name and call out a lot of the maladies, which would gave me pause to making that decision. That is now public knowledge that for sure you would have been claimed anti whatever. I always ask people at home, I'm like, if you are on board with this therapy, if you believe in it, are you still getting all the recommended boosters? And I think the uptake for boosters is like 20% of the population at this time. It's
I
very,
thought it
very
was
low.
even less. I thought it was like 3%. I could be wrong. I mean, we're
Uh,
on like our 10th booster, so
yeah,
it's
yeah. I just wonder, are you an anti-vaxxer if you're not getting all the recommended boosters?
oh, according to the Webster's dictionary, you are.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I just think, yeah, it's really interesting. And I wish it wasn't politicized. I wish we could have this conversation and not have people be like, "Oh, this is terrible. Why you're bringing this back up?" I definitely, like you, I have a lot of like probably stored emotion in my body because I was really frustrated. I felt like I couldn't speak my mind, or I felt like I wasn't being heard, and that's a terrible thing to be as a human being, and that'll make you sick.
Yeah.
So I know it's important to process, and I know it's important to let go. We focus on what we can focus on. So let's move on from that topic. I thank you for sharing. Thank you for, first, before we move on, thanks for your role of service and doing all you do, because it was a hairy place to be, and it was a really hard position to be in. And I think it'd be hard to imagine a role of service that wasn't under more scrutiny through those 2 years. So tip of the hat to you.
You know what, Freddie? The only thing I'll say with that is it taught me a lot. I think I was meant to do it. Like out of 2,000 cops, only 70 of us said we're not going to do this. And I would just say to people too is that this will happen again at some point, but it'll happen later when we've forgotten about it. And standing up and being courageous. I didn't think I was being courageous. Now I see the importance of doing these, having these moments. But I always tell people, yes, I lost a $200,000 paying job that I supported my family for. My wife doesn't work; she takes care of the kids. So I lost everything, and losing everything is probably the greatest thing that's ever happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not trying to. I mean, listen, I lost a lot, and it hurts, but it's taught me so much about who I am. It's taught me a lot about surrender. It taught me a lot about what does it mean to be on this planet. And I would have never got shooken up that way if I didn't do what I did. And most people, they never even go through that they never get shaken up. Next thing you know, they're on their deathbed and like, oh my God, I have all these regrets. I get to look you in the eyes and everybody else and be like, man, I get to say, this one I don't regret. And I always say I'm being protected and promoted. So something is destined for me. And I think for
Yeah.
anybody, when you're on the other side, that's a message I'd say for everybody. When you have to go through those dark places, just remember there's something. You're being guided for a higher purpose that you don't even know. So you're being protected and promoted.
Yeah. I would agree with you. I think that's a universal truth. I just released a podcast on Monday, why stop saying I'm sorry. The basic idea being when we say sorry for everything in this reflexive manner, we're trying to say that all the painful experiences can't be medicine. And I think everything is an opportunity for growth if you let it sit on a long enough timeline, albeit painful. And there's different things to say than that phrase. But when we're looking at your exit out of the police force, and now you're really like spending 100% of your time with clients and coaching, and what does that look like for you today? What are you focusing on in the world of wellness, human optimization?
Yeah, man. So I took that as a sign from God or source, whatever you call it, that Joel,
Mm-hmm.
stop playing. Because I had already started my coaching business on the side. But as you know, when you're doing part of this and part of that, you can only be so successful. So I took that as a sign to go all in for the first time in my business. My wife gave me the blessing to do it. And so I went all in. And like any good entrepreneur starting out, it doesn't go as planned. And I was doing okay in my business, but I wasn't doing spectacular. And I started off doing holistic weight loss and doing a lot of holistic health coaching, which I absolutely love. And after about like a year and a half of doing it, I go, I'm just like breaking even. Something's wrong. Something is wrong here. And I asked myself, what's the problem? It's the Facebook ads, the Instagram ads, the algorithm change, all these things I was blaming. And I said, you know what? BS. That is not the problem. The problem is you, Joel. The problem is you're not aligned with your truth, and nothing vibrates faster than the truth. So why there's a misalignment here? What is it? And I asked myself the question, and the truth was I didn't feel lit up to do holistic weight loss coaching. I love holistic health. Weight loss just is not like, I'm glad to get people results, but I also just don't care about it that much. Like I love like we're holistic health in just so many other ways, right? And I said, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm done with this. I'm going to shelve this business. And at the same time, my wife was saying to me, Joel, you need to fix the marriage. Our marriage sucks. The kids hate you. And I'd been married for 10 years at the time. So you think, oh man, good luck changing that marriage. And it was rough. The way I describe my marriage is like 1 week was good, 1 week was bad. And I could never figure out why my marriage sucked, because the interesting thing is my health was always good. My career was well. I did well with money and I did well with health. But my kids, they didn't get spanked. They ate organic. They did detox, parasite protocols, all these things. And yet we would have these fights where they would yell, scream at me, spit at me. I'd have to leave the house, Freddie, just walk away because I didn't know what to do. You see all these books behind me, and I know you interview some of these folks. I was studying Daniel Siegel, parenting. I was doing all these things and nothing was working for me, man. And my wife here now is saying, Joel, you know, even though you're like bankrupt, you need to fix the marriage. And I'm like, you're crazy. Like I've done so much work on myself. Like, why don't you do something? She's like, nope, I want you to go work with this men's coach. And I'm like, I'm not going to spend $5,000 on a life men's coach when the problem right now in our life is the business is not working. And if I have more money, then I'll be more present with you and the kids. That's the problem. So I should put my money elsewhere. She would not take that as an answer. She was quite pissed and she really made a stand. And it's a key moment because I would tell every woman to go out and make a stand because like my wife did. At the time, I didn't like it, but it was the best thing for me. So begrudgingly, I went and hired this men's coach. And I figured after a month of dealing with this guy, he's going to tell me, Joel, you're awesome. Clearly it's your wife is the problem. And you know, even when we were doing the intake call, I remember he goes, going to need you to wake up earlier. I go, I wake up at 4 a.m. He goes, well, shit, you have me beat by 15 minutes. He goes, I'm going to need you to read every day. I go, I do that already. I'm going to need you to do cold plunge. No, he didn't tell me cold plunges, but I'm like, pretty much everything he told me to do, I'm like, I already do this. Like there are probably 2 things out of his list of 10 I didn't do. So I'm like, whatever. But I was open-minded. I was like, dude, I'm actually motivated. Like I was all in. I was like, I was motivated because he clearly fixed his marriage and I haven't fixed mine. So I went all in after a month of doing work with this guy. And after a month, Freddie, I realized one big thing, that I am still an asshole and I have a lot of room to grow. And when I realized that was true, I went all in on my family for the first time I can say ever in my life. A lot of people talk about going all in and I worked really hard for my kids. No, you don't. You work hard for yourself. And I can say that as a guy who worked hard many years and I just don't have work-life balance. You don't want work-life balance. Like you like to work and I do too, guys. I love to work. So it fills me up. But your kids are taking a back seat and so is your wife and your relationship. Long story short, prioritize my relationship to the fullest. Within 3 months, my marriage radically transformed. My relationship with my kids radically transformed. And I went all into the process for the last couple of years. And after a year of doing the work, I had a lot of guys reach out to me and say, well, what are you up to? What are you doing? I would tell them. And they're like, oh shit, my marriage sucks too. I'm like, well, you should do these things. And then I went back and after a year of doing the work, I reverse engineered everything I did because I wanted to know, could I help other men do the same thing? Like, was I just lucky or was there a framework? And I came to the conclusion that marriage and fatherhood is a skill, just like anything else. Very rarely do we think of it that way. We wing our relationships most of the time. We're like, I hope I found my soulmate. Like, that's what we say. And when things don't work out, we're just like, she probably wasn't the one. And I thought that too. But that's the reason why divorce is 43% right now in the United States. And second and third marriages are up to 60 to 73% of divorce. You know why? Because you never fix the root problem. You always blamed your significant other and you thought, oh, I just need to find it's another person is missing. No, the problem is you. And the problem is probably her too. And it's how you're actually interacting. And so long story short, Freddie, is I realized there is a framework and that's what I'm doing now, helping men transform their relationships with their kids and their marriage. And I'm on a mission, man, because I never had issues with weight loss, but I did have issues in my marriage and I figured it out and I can figure it out. And I figured out the framework that other guys need too. And it works.
Joel, if you could go a little deeper into the aha moment, you said you had this moment, said, I'm an asshole. Like,
Yeah.
what did it take to peel back that layer for that level of self-awareness where you just were hit in the face with your truth?
I remember the first month of just trying to transform the marriage, and my wife, even though she knew I was doing this program, I hired this guy, I told her I was doing this stuff. She was not happy. I mean, she was not nice to me. Extremely moody, not giving everything I was doing was just bouncing off of her. And I remember just being like, this is crazy. Like, I'm doing what you're asking me, and you're not giving me any credit. But I realized that, and every guy will realize this if they do the work, is that she didn't trust me. She wanted to trust me. She really, really did secretly, but she didn't because I failed her so many times and wasn't consistent in the past. And so I knew that I had to demonstrate leadership. I knew that I had to prove to her that I am worthy of this. And when I went back and kept doing it, kept getting feedback, kept getting my ass kicked, kept getting feedback from my coaches, my community, and I kept putting in the work, eventually she softened. And that was the aha moment, like, okay, this stuff does work. And I followed the process, and there's a process. Like I said, there's a process, there's a framework. You have to follow it. And a lot of times I think in the past, I probably just tried something for a week, didn't work. I'd say the other aha was that I was just so all in, Freddie, that
Mm-hmm.
so there was no, I knew I was going to go all in this program for a year. And I was going to give it everything I had. And that, because I was just so convinced that was the only option, I didn't give myself a wiggle option of like, this didn't work out this time. Maybe she's not the right one. Maybe we should get a divorce. None of those thoughts even filtered in my head. And so when I put in the work, and even though it sucked in the beginning, there were a lot of ups and downs, eventually I saw the fruition of the good work. And that was really the aha, like, oh, going back to fatherhood's a skill, marriage is a skill. That was the aha. This is fixable.
Yeah. And has the dynamic with your kids also shifted with this work that you've really leaned into as being a father and being a better partner?
Yeah. Yeah. Even the same thing, I'd say like that transformed in like 3 months. I mean, my kid, you go back, there was a lot of things interesting too. My oldest son would have night terrors in the middle of the night. And again, he never got beaten or anything, but I just think the emotional stress, even if it was nonverbal, that my wife and I presented, and my lack of presence around him, because I was so caught up in everything I was doing, my work, overtime, and then the work that we do, you and I both love to do on the side. I mean, you do it full time. At the time, I was doing on the side as a cop. And so, man, I was just not present. I was lacking presence. And I remember one time I took my kid out on a date. I call like my oldest, we went out on a special day, and I put my phone away, and we only had it out to take photos of us. And I remember he came back and told my wife, hey, dad and I are friends again. And he told
Mm.
my wife, um, and he just knew because I was so connected to him, Freddie. Like, I didn't do anything special. I just wasn't on my freaking phone other than to take photos of us, and he felt that. And that was I didn't know he said that. She later told me that. Yeah, he said that you guys are friends again. And not that I ever thought that we were not friends. We were he's my son. He's my buddy. There was nothing traumatic happened. Is what I'm trying to tell people. There was no big moment. It was just the little cuts over time. And so night terrors, Freddie, went away. The blowouts of spitting and kicking, and they all went away. And then of course my relationship with my wife, flourished.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm reading this book right now, Us, and it's looking at it's basically it's how you're viewing the individual relationship and then the relationship as a collective, and in general the book keeps referring back to the idea that men generally don't think in terms of a collective. There isn't an us dialogue. It's coming at a situation or a problem as an individual, and they're going to fix it and analyze it and do a Newtonian process of like, I'm going to do this, and then this is going to happen, and then this. And that's not the reality. It's really interesting. He also talks about the different ways in which we have these really rare instances where you're sexually abused, not rare, but that trauma, the sexual abuse, he said many times can be trumped by years of avoidant behavior from a parent. It can be like the microaggressions over time that as actually the thing that stands out is the malady in the child's brain. It's been really wild. And so he kind of laughs at everybody when all the, in the couples therapy, the men are like, I don't have any trauma. And they're like, tell me more about that. What was your mom like? Was she stern? How did you learn to adapt as a child to that behavior? Did you avoid? Did you lie? Did you try to make her happy? And you're seeing how a child starts to adapt a persona to be able to manage. And that's all they're doing. They're just trying to make it work with what they're given.
Yeah. Yeah. Kids are, there's a phrase I like that I read from a book the other day. They're like psychic sponges for our emotions as parents. And so it's so true. The parents will always come in like, I want to fix my kid. He needs help. He's got this. Like, fix your freaking self first, bro. Okay. You're the problem. And listen, not that kids don't have some of these issues, but I would agree with that statement. Go fix yourself first and then worry about them.
Yeah, I really think that's where all medicine lies is in the self. I was feeling very frustrated over the last month, and I did a frustration meditation. It was beautiful, guided, and it all came back to like, look, this is another human being who wants to be loved. That's all they want. They may be expressing it in an imperfect way. But if you can talk to the part of yourself that's feeling this angst and where is it in your body? And I was like, oh, I felt like 40% better after like this little 15-minute meditation where I could take, a deeper level of awareness of the situation as opposed to creating story. I want to ask you, before we go, I know you got a podcast at the top of the hour, just a little bit about, in this world of human optimization, wellness technology, because you have access, what is one of your favorite pieces of technology you've ever invested in for yourself? It could be sleep, muscle, longevity, energy.
Yeah, good question. And so for people that don't know, like I have a lot of tech. I'm looking at my office right now. I have a Carol bike, I have a vibration platform, I have a red light panel, and over there I've got a cold plunge. I've got a NeuFit, a newbie, which I know you've interviewed Garrett Salpeter from NeuFit in Austin. So I have an electric stim machine. And I have a sauna. I think that's it. I have an amp coil too. So I forgot about that. So I've got PMF and sound therapy as well. So I've got a lot. I would say, and I say this all the time, these gadgets are very cool, but you don't need any of that shit. Like I've learned that through buying a lot of this crap too. It's fun. It's health optimization and it's really cool. And I'll continue to do it and push the edges because I want to learn more.
Mm-hmm.
But if someone was just like, what's one piece of equipment? I would tell them get a sauna. Sauna to me, like the research is so robust. Like you can get the infrared light, you can detox yourself, you can get DNA repair from the freaking heat shock proteins, and you can get a VO2 zone 2 cardio workout by not even running. Like the amount of benefits, guys, you can get from that, it's just insane. So
it's incredible.
Yeah, I have a Therasage sauna that I got, and it was like at the time I got it at a show, so I got like $700. They go for like 1,000. Totally worth it. That's the biggest bang buck if you can get anything. One of my favorite pieces of tech, though, because you asked favorite, is definitely the NeuFit. I think now that machine's like 18,000, so that's not going to be something that everyone's going to go out and get. But the reason that I come back to that is. And it becomes more and more profound the more I've done. I'm working with a woman in Boise who had a C6, C5 spinal cord injury. They told her, you'll never walk again. Well, she proved them wrong. Within 2 weeks, she started walking. And the Western doc goes, well, good, so lucky you, I guess, you got to walk. So when she came to see me, Freddie, she found out about the NeuFit and says, hey, can it work for me? I go, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to make promises, but I'm happy to work on you. Let's just see. When she came and saw me, her hand was spastic, okay? Her right hand was spastic. And if you're watching a video, you can see I'm curling my hand. Like her right hand would not open. It couldn't even open the hand. And it just was locked. Okay. And then her right gait, her right foot was like a drop foot, which is something typically we see like in an MS population, drop foot. Okay. So when she came to see me, that was the issue. Within 3 treatments, she came back to me and she showed me her hand. She goes, hey, look at my hand. And it's opening. Okay. No problem. And she hands me this book, which was like her journal. And I go, like, great. Like, what is this? And she's like, oh no, like I wrote in it. I'm like, okay. And she's like, no, you don't understand. Joel, I wrote with my right hand. I haven't written with my right hand in 2 years. She taught herself how to write with her left hand because her left hand worked, but her right hand, guys, was closed and spastic. So we were able to open up her hand in just 3 treatments. Recently, I even worked on her with her wrist, and I just changed something. Even the wrist was somewhat locked; it wouldn't open. Her hands were open, her fingers, but she actually couldn't like do this, which is like just like if you were doing a forearm curl, like you were working out, and unlock that in 1 treatment. So the right gait is really good, and it's getting better. And it's just a work in progress, but the reason it works so powerfully is number 1, and you touched on it earlier, is the nervous system. The more I come back to this, we're using breath tools. We're using all these tools to balance the nervous system. The nervous system is so freaking key, and we skip it. We skip it in everything we do. No doctors are talking about it. You talk about it all the time, I know.
Yeah.
But we skip over that. And what I would tell people is that's priority number 1, because you can't do a detox protocol if your nervous system, like you have mold. Oh, let me give you some binders, Freddie, because that's what works for mold, we think, right? Even if it did work, it'll never take for you because your nervous system is so hijacked and in fight or flight. The nervous system is so key, guys. And the NeuFit, you can do a protocol known as a master reset to put people in a parasympathetic state. I love it. I do it every freaking day. Now I have tech. You asked me how I do it as a police officer, but now I have tech that I can just do it every day. So I do that. And the other thing is we're actually changing the input that the brain receives. So we're actually creating like a rewire process. Everything is related to the brain. I've come to realize that over and over again. It's all in your freaking mind. And that's why I think the NeuFit is so powerful, because for her, I love to use the example of someone like their shoulder. And I've had this happen. Someone comes in, they're like, Joel, I can't get my arm over my shoulder. Like it stops right here. Like, okay, so there's an injury. So I'll do a scanning process with the NeuFit, and I'll find what we call hotspots. They're essentially governors that the brain has shut off in the body because it's trying to keep you safe. And a lot of times when you get injured or hurt, especially chronic pain, the brain turns off certain governors in the body because it's just trying to protect you. But it stays in this neurofeedback pain loop even after the injury or the trauma has occurred. It still thinks it exists. So it's trying to protect you naturally. So what we do is we send direct current. Your body is electric. Go read Gavin Becker's book, The Body Electric. Your body is electric. It is a DC current. The newbie is a DC current. So when I put the input of the current into those hotspots, I turn them back on, and your brain says, oh, wait a second. It is safe. It's safe to do this. Next thing you know, within 1 treatment, I've had this happen. Guys' shoulders going right over their head. It's so, so powerful. Nervous system and then the rewiring of the brain. And that's why the results stick with the NeuFit so much. You could also do workouts with it. You can change the frequency. So you can do hypertrophy workouts and different style of workouts that you could just never replicate in real life. Like I can do a protocol, 55 pulses per second. 55 pulses per second. I don't even need a freaking weight in my hand, and I can build muscle with the NeuFit. So I can do it for that, or I can do it for recovery. It's one of my favorite pieces of tech.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exploding. There were so many Olympic athletes that Garrett was working with prior to the games. Most NFL teams, and not just teams, like the best players on the teams. I know Odell Beckham. It's really incredible how that technology has been adopted like all over the place. One thing I will say about that tech is you really do know how to use it. You need to do the training. You need to be able to know how to do the NeuFit and scan properly. It's not just applying, 55 pulses per second on a bicep, which, you don't want an overly strong bicep. You want it to be strong in relation to the other pulleys around the body. So it's definitely something we want to have training around. But I'm such a huge fan. I have this protocol where I've been doing, I asked Garrett about it a couple of weeks ago. I was like, bro, I don't know if you've ever done this, but I put one of the pads on my lower back. I get one of the pads that's the rubber circle with a sponge, and I do the muscles on my face. Like, at first I was like, oh, I bet if I do DC current on my face, I bet it's an anti-aging, like anti-wrinkle, right? Because your face gets really tight after you do it. But then I get this great neurocognitive benefit. I just do my temples, my face, my jawline on 500 hertz.
Yep.
And just a 6 or a 6 to 10. Sometimes
not that high. Good.
No. Really, really gentle. And then I'll even do some on my scalp. But man, my brain, it feels like I had 2 cups of coffee. Really, really. And he said he's had other people report this too. A couple things. I would say it's probably affecting the tension of the muscles around the head, and then in turn impacting lymphatic drainage or cellular waste from the brain. That's my one thought. It's got to have an impact there. And then number two, where I mentioned me being frustrated. Like, where's that gonna materialize in the body? Probably the temples, probably the jawline. So physically letting some of that tension go, it's been awesome. So that's kind of been my go-to with the NeuFit lately. If you do, definitely report back and try it if you happen to hit that.
Try it now. Yeah, I
Five
have
five
never done that.
minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes. Really fascinating.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'll use that with the pad you're talking about to just kind of electric foam roll through sticky spots.
Yeah.
And I know Garrett will use it as well as what you're talking about all over his body, like coming out of an airplane, and a kind of a way to ground his body and like just kind of discharge some of that stuff. So I have never heard though doing it on just the head. I don't see why. I mean, we know that it can increase neurogenesis and we're waking up things. And like you mentioned, the jaw, the face, a lot of tension gets held in there. And, someone I had on my podcast recently, she does a lot of quantum healing and says that a lot of the stuff here in the face and the jaw relates down to the pelvis, relates down to emotional centers. So when you can clear this, the jaw face, you might even clear other things. So yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, 100%. Well, listen, I want to let you go to your other interview. We will definitely do it again. Appreciate you being on. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, check me out, Joel Evan Coaching on Instagram. I'm active there. You can go to my website. It hasn't been updated in a while. And then if you are interested in building an unshakable marriage, deeper connection with your kids, you can check me out. The website should be live any day now, limitlessfathers.com.
Great. I love it, Joel. Thanks for all your transparency and your honesty. Again, thank you for your work, and thank you for being a guest on the Beautifully Broken podcast.
Love you, brother. Thanks, man.
Big love.